And later, maybe even we'll have an appearance from Greg Gutfeld. But first, it may not have been a blue wave, but it's certainly a new wave. With all the Republican retirements as well as the Democrats' gains, it's one of the biggest freshman classes Congress has ever seen. You've got young activists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a huge number of veterans, including Republican Dan Crenshaw, who inspired us all with his gracious response to that Saturday Night Live attack on him, and many newly elected members who've never worked in politics before. So, could this lead to more bipartisan action so Congress actually gets things done for you? Or will it be obstruction and gridlock all the way? Here to discuss, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former Bernie Sanders national staffer Teslin Figaro, and Fox News contributor and president of Independent Women's Voice, Tammy Bruce. What fun, by the way, to have all of you together, all on one show. I'm so excited about it. Let's start with you, Lisa, on this, what we can expect next year. You know the D.C. scene very well. It's never one thing or another. It's always a balance. But I just want you to try and put a percentage on it. What percentage of what happens do you think is going to be constructive work that helps the American people versus obstruction and efforts just to take down President Trump?
Well, you're right, Steve. I've spent a lot of time working on Capitol Hill. Sadly, I wish I had better news because it is almost Christmas, but I would say probably about 10%. I think Congress is largely just going to do the basic functioning of government, keeping the government open, debt ceiling increases, things of that nature. I don't think there's going to be a lot of constructive work from a bipartisan manner, unfortunately. And I think, look, Nancy Pelosi is going to be feeling a lot of pressure both from her caucus in regarding a growing progressive caucus. I think that's going to present trouble for her. You also have, even with her trying to get the speaker's gavel, more moderate members also opposing her. They're the ones that signed that letter saying they would not support her. That's going to be a trouble spot for her as well. And Democrats have already signaled that what they're expecting is investigation after investigation. You have Jerry Nadler saying that President Trump could be impeached over the latest information we found out with Cohen regarding the payments and potential campaign finance violations. You have an Adam Schiff, House Intel. It's going to be Russia, Russia, Russia. So I think President Trump's got a lot of political minefields ahead of him, unfortunately.
God, you're really cheering us up with that.
I know, I'm sorry. I wish I had. I got to be honest. I wish I had better news. I'm sorry.
Of course. Now, Tammy, look, there's one way of looking at this. I mean, perhaps from a sort of philosophically more conservative point of view is, it's not the end of the world if Congress doesn't do a lot of things. Sometimes, we want government not to do very much and just to sort of get out of the way. Would that be a silver lining in terms of what we might be expecting next year?
Yeah, that's why, I always wonder why everyone panics when there's a threat to shut down the government. A lot of us maybe would really like that to happen for a while, with some certain basic things that would continue to work. But look, we have a government for a reason and some very specific things. They ruined our healthcare system. And the Republicans did not step up to repeal and replace the dynamic that was happening. They've picked apart pieces of it. So clearly healthcare was a big issue in 2018. It's going to be a big issue in 2020. So Americans want solutions in a limited way. We want issues regarding, of course, national security, the border, healthcare, and the economy. It's a very, very basic dynamic. We want to be able to be free to live our lives. That said, this notion of what the Democrats are going to be able to do, I think this argument that there's going to be this internecine fight in the Democrats is a very important point. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has got ideas that are not going to be accepted by the establishment. Nancy Pelosi is going to be speaker because she raises money, but arguably there's no leader of the party. And so if it's going to be that directionless, this is going to be an opportunity for the president. He does well with a foil. He clearly is a negotiator. My worry is because he is persuadable, we might see things coming out that some conservatives might not like, but we've got to get certain things covered. Now, the Democrats, and I'll end with this, Steve, don't want solutions, I argue. Teslin will probably disagree. They feel that they won in 18 because of problems. That is what they feel that they're the best at, of exploiting problems. So I don't see the Democrats going out of their way to solve problems. I think they will be obstructionist, and I think that will not bode well for them in 2020.
Just before I go to Tez and Tammy, I'm really interested in the point you made about the kind of risks of, if you like, too much cooperation between the president and Nancy Pelosi in the wrong areas. Just give me one or two examples of what you might be worrying about in that area.
Yeah, well, I think that in some ways, I think when it comes to health care, is this notion of any kind of framework of moving more toward what's called single payer, which is nationalized health care. We really have to stay focused on the importance of the private sector, of freedom of choice, of Americans being able to choose what works best for them. And when government gets involved in anything of these kinds of things, it makes it worse, of course. And so Democrats, any compromise with the Democrats means more government. And the president has to stand against that. And he's the president because Americans don't want that. We want solutions, but we want it to be solutions that work. And the Democrats, after 8 years of Obama, certainly proved that the Democratic solutions to things are not what we want.
All right. So, Teslin, how do you see the sort of battle within the Democrats then in Congress with all those new members, particularly Ocasio-Cortez, always held up as the example, but there's more behind her in that same spirit. How's that going to shape up?
Well, I think, first of all, we'll see more of the real representatives of D.C., starring Trump, Pelosi, and Schumer. We'll see more of that, a reality show on TV. I absolutely love the transparency. I hope we see more of it. I think Trump will be pushing a lot of that. But to be quite honest with you, I actually do agree with Tammy. I mean, and maybe not because Democrats don't want to see solutions, but I think they're going to take a page from the Republicans' book. When Barack Obama was elected, they said they wanted to make sure he was a one-term president, and I think people feel the same way about President Trump. Unfortunately, both parties will be interested in who will secure the White House in 2020. So to me, it will be just a big show of individuals trying to shore up the base. Trump is going to make sure that he keeps transparency to let his base know where his position is. Democrats are still going to, try to get their positioning. But the unfortunate thing about Democrats is even though they talk a good game like Republicans, they really don't hold the line. So they probably will bend on a couple of things, which is all that bending is how they lost in 2008, in 2010 when we lost all of the seats all over the country. So we'll see. Pelosi is determined to show that she's able to bring both sides together, say one thing in front of us and then do another behind people's backs. So we'll see if the Democrats will stand firm or will they try to get something done. But honestly, Steve, I think it's just going to be an election campaign, pre-election campaign for 2020.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a pretty kind of unanimous view from all of you there. It's going to be kind of what we've got used to in terms of Washington. But, it's going to be fun either way. We'll enjoy covering it all. Thanks, all of you. Coming up, 2018 was a huge year for the populist revolution here in America and around the world. The people's fight back against elitism continues. But will it strengthen or run out of steam in 2019? That's next. Welcome back, everyone. The election of President Trump in 2016 was the biggest moment in the worldwide populist revolution. Americans said loud and clear they'd had enough of elitist policies that had worked out great for those at the top, but hurt working people whose incomes went down, jobs went away, and their communities were ripped apart by decades of globalization, automation, centralization, and uncontrolled immigration. You saw the same thing with Brexit in the UK. And then this year, right across the world, new populist presidents in Mexico and Brazil, a new populist government in Italy, Germany's once all-powerful Angela Merkel on her way out after a humiliating election result, and that arrogant elitist President Macron of France, humbled by populist street protests. Yes, the forgotten men and women are fighting back, but the elitists don't like it. They're trying to overturn Brexit. And of course, here in America, they're doing everything they can to undermine President Trump and overturn the 2016 election result. So where is populism headed in 2019? Let's bring back our friends. Tammy, let me start with you on this one. It seems to me that the response of the elites to what's been happening is not to question their own record or their policies or their approach. It's simply to treat this whole populist movement as something of an aberration. We just got to, get rid of Donald Trump, overturn Brexit, whatever, and then we can get back to business as usual. They just don't seem to understand the seriousness of this change.
Well, look, part of the problem here in America is that they saw that they were able to do that after the Reagan victory. They saw that that was a very different dynamic, and then they waited 8 years, and then they were able to begin to just use the establishment again to reverse those gains. And it was like a bad dream for them. They think that's going to happen again. They are mistaken. And not just for the Republicans because of the election of Donald Trump, but also the Democrats, right? I think that there is an establishment view there that these upstarts on the left are just going to have to be quelled, and that is going to be a fight in the next 2 years. But I think that they may be underestimating what that fight is. Keep in mind, with the elections coming up, at the 2020 elections, it's one thing to have a view of what's going to be happening in the presidency, but remember, there's going to be a lot of primaries where still it's going to be the left versus the establishment, and those fights will once again be public. The Republicans have already gone through it. They've already gone through it.
Right.
The president is, I think, in a very good position. He has been remarkable. I do not doubt that he will actually thrive in this new environment. And, of course, the American people know he's got to come through with some more working on some of the details of his promises. But he's going to thrive, and he will be a constant reminder of what the populism is. Teslin mentioned, of course, the transparency. Him bringing in those cameras in that meeting in the White House was genius. And that's what we want to see. And, of course, no one else wants to do it that way, but he is not going to let up, and I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. Teslin, Tammy made a really good point there about the populism on the left and how it's changing things there as well. Of course, you know, you were part of the start of that with the Bernie Sanders campaign. One thing I'm really interested in is, even as the 2020 race is taking shape, already you're seeing the lead that Bernie Sanders set in terms of not taking money from super PACs and raising money from small donors. That seems to be becoming something that is, you know, almost something that is disqualifying to a Democrat candidate if they don't follow that path. Do you see it playing out that way?
Yeah, you know, I do actually. You know, this is really interesting. You know, I always say all the time, I joined the Bernie Sanders campaign not because I'm a socialist, because I'm not and I never will be, but because of his populist ideas of being anti-establishment. You know, he did a really good job of bringing that energy. But I am concerned, Steve, that a lot of his moves that he made with, you know, trying to make amends with Hillary Clinton and, you know, still work, which we understand he's a sitting senator, so obviously he had to work, you know, with more moderate Democrats. But there are some folks out there that follow Bernie Sanders who were disappointed, you know, in a lot of the decisions that he made post-election. So the left, Tammy's absolutely right about that. There will absolutely be a fight on the left side. Right now, everybody's singing and getting along and saying, you know, anybody but Trump. But at one point in time through those primaries, you can better believe there'll be a lot of dirt digging and a lot of shovels on people's back to pretty much bring down whoever's necessary. And so people are looking for more of a populist candidate that is not necessarily socialist, that can still be somewhat moderate, but against the elite. And it's a very sticky line, so a very fine line. So these candidates who are saying, oh, I'm so progressive, I'm all about this, I'm all about that, just prepare for the tape to be rolled, because we'll be able to go back and see for the last 5, 10, 15 years, you know, where you really stand in your position. And that's the good thing about having multiple candidates. Let's really dig down deep and see if people really mean what they say and if they can back it up and walk it like they talk it, like is what I call it.
Very interesting. Very good summary there. Populist candidate who's not a socialist. Interesting. Lisa, what do you see as the future for the, let's just look at the GOP establishment, the Never Trumpers, all that gang. Where are they? What's going to happen with them?
Well, I actually think regarding that, look, President Trump is so politically astute, and he has never given credit for it. He was among a field of 17 different candidates. And he was able to see both the primary field and the general election field better than any other candidate, better than any other Republican, better than Hillary Clinton. And what he saw is that there was a group of people in this country who really felt left behind by President Obama and the Democrat politics. Because if you remember, President Obama's sole focus and the Democrats' sole focus was identity politics. So you had a lot of people in this country, a lot of blue-collar workers who felt left behind by the Democrat Party, who felt ignored for 8 years under President Obama. And President Trump saw that. He was able to tap into that anger. So I think heading into 2020, President Trump should not be underestimated. He sees things in a political way that a lot of people don't. And he knows how to message and he knows how to connect with people in a way that a lot of normal politicians don't.
Great points, all. Thank you so much. Of course, we'll be following all of this very closely on this show. But coming up, one congressman's positive and practical solution to expanding tech jobs.
America's News headquarters, I'm Marianne Rafferty. Defense Secretary James Mattis has signed off on orders to withdraw all U.S. troops from Syria. This according to a senior defense official. Mattis resigned after President Trump's decision to pull service members out of the country after declaring victory over ISIS. Earlier today, the president tweeted that Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan will become acting secretary the first of the year. That's weeks earlier than the departure date of February 28th that Mattis mentioned in his resignation letter on Thursday. And nearly 300 people are dead following a devastating tsunami in Indonesia. It struck without warning along the country's Sunda Strait Saturday. Scientists believe a volcanic eruption and undersea landslide caused the disaster. Nearly 1,000 people were injured. 30 remain missing. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Now back to the next revolution.
One of the most obvious consequences of the elitist policy agenda of the last few decades is the way that the jobs and wealth from our fast-growing technology industries have been concentrated in the richest coastal cities like San Francisco and New York, while huge parts of the American heartland were ignored. Unbelievably, Hillary Clinton even made a virtue of this elitism, boasting about how in the 2016 election she won the votes of the dynamic parts of the country, while Donald Trump was supported in the places that had been left behind. Well, yes, exactly. That is absolutely the point of the populist movement, to speak up for and to help the people and places that have been left behind. But thank goodness, not all Democrats are elitists. And tonight, for our positive and practical segment, I'm joined by our friend, Congressman Ro Khanna, who has a plan to expand tech jobs to seemingly forgotten states. Welcome back, Congressman. Great to see you again. I always wrote you're with us for our very first show, and it's lovely to see you anytime, but particularly because you've got something very specific and practical that I think could really help people. Just tell us your plan.
Well, thanks, Steve. Congrats on the success of your show. I think we have to recognize that most people in rural America don't want to live on the coast. They want to live next to their families. They like the independence. They like small town values. And it's offensive for them to say, go move to San Francisco or Austin. We need to bring the jobs to them. And it also makes economic sense. So this past week, I took 10 tech leaders, including the founder of LinkedIn, the CTO of Microsoft. We went to Jefferson, Iowa. We created 25 jobs that will pay $65,000. Those folks in Jefferson get to stay in Jefferson. It's a 2-year credential. We need more programs like that across this country.
So just to be clear, what you're doing there is not really using the sort of legislative process. You're actually doing something through non-governmental means, which I think would be very exciting to everyone watching. Say, well, you don't need government to get on with this. You just need leaders who will actually get people to change their focus. And that seems to be what you're doing. Is that right?
There's that part of it where we can say, look, those jobs don't have to pay as much as they do in the Bay Area. Housing isn't as expensive, so there's an economic case to partner. And by the way, when you go to places in rural America, you see there's an extraordinary ingenuity and education and hunger to be part of this new economy. There's also a legislative piece, and I have a proposal to have tech grants for the 21st century, similar to land grants that Abraham Lincoln signed, saying let's give some of these educational institutions funding to create tech institutes that will lead to real jobs in rural America. And it's practical. You know, I heard your previous panelists saying we aren't all solution-oriented, but I actually worked with Rob Portman this term just last week. We're going to have a bill going to the president's desk that he will sign to modernize websites. I think Republicans can get on board with the idea of tech grants to land-grant institutions to help rural America and the heartland get jobs in the new economy.
I just think it's really great, and it's one of those things that just is totally non-partisan and, frankly, exactly what members of Congress should be doing, and I really appreciate that you're doing it. So thank you very much for what you're doing and for telling us about it tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right, let's bring in Tammy, Lisa, and Teslin. Teslin, what's your reaction? Isn't this is kind of, like we say, positive and practical? What's not to like?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot. What's like, I'm really excited about this. You know, when I saw this segment, you know, I thought about Ray Lewis, football Hall of Famer, who went to President Trump, worked with him early on, was highly criticized. He founded an organization called Global 1000. I've been working with that group for several months now with Dr. Lance McCarthy, and they focus on black tech jobs. They have a black tech initiative that focuses on black tech jobs within urban communities. So although rural communities are important, there's also urban communities, and particularly African-American communities. So when he said that we said the Democrats are not solution-based or solution-oriented, that's not necessarily true. What we said was a lot of people will be running for office in 2020. Maybe he's not one of them, but there are good things getting done. There are people who have put their entire reputation on the line to work with this particular White House to get things done. And I appreciate you, Steve, for bringing attention to this, because it's something that you don't hear about often. You're probably the only one that I know that actually talks about tech and the importance of it. And so it's great what he's doing. And, you know, hopefully some of his Democrats who aren't selfishly involved in running for office or grandstanding will get on board and help him move this forward.
I appreciated, Lisa, what he was saying at the beginning there about, look, you can't just sort of say to people, you know, move and find work. You know, people have their roots in communities and family. And actually, it used to be the case that you could make a decent living and support your family, you know, pretty much everywhere in America. That was the whole point of America and the opportunities it provided in so many different ways right across the country. That's one of the things that seems to have gone. And what President Trump was elected on was, I think, to try and bring back some of that sense of opportunity.
Well, and I love this idea, and I think trying to bring jobs to areas that need them, of course, you know, who couldn't support that? I will say, however, I think the congressman has mentioned previously, you know, states like Kentucky and West Virginia. Remember that those states have been particularly hard hit because of President Obama's war on coal. So that's part of a reason why some of these areas like states like West Virginia have been decimated. I worked for a member of Congress from West Virginia, spent a lot of time traveling the state, and there's areas that have just been so economically depressed and hit because of that war on coal. So I would just point that out. But of course, I think trying to bring jobs to these areas, find ways to get, you know, partnerships with different companies, whether it's Microsoft, you know, whatever, trying to get them interested in bringing those jobs to new areas where cost of living is low, where those jobs are needed, is a brilliant idea. And, you know, everyone should be behind it.
And Tammy, there's another part of this I think is really important and not appreciated at all. I hope we'll be able to cover it a bit more in the new year, which is the work that the White House is leading, particularly Ivanka Trump, actually, on what they call workforce development, on bringing skills to people so they can get the jobs of the future, regardless of where they live. I think it's another example of there's so much going on, actually, that's positive from this administration that just literally never gets talked about because it's endless sort of soap opera stuff about Russia or whatever.
Yes, and this is, I think, a different point of view when it comes to college versus like a vocational school, right? What kind of job are you going to get if you're, you know, got a degree in women's studies versus being able to code, especially for young women in the STEM fields. So that's really, really good news. And I don't mean to be a wet blanket here, but having come from the left, you know what I see happening here. Because this is a partisan issue when it comes to the tech industry, not all of it, but a great deal. When we think about Google or Facebook or Apple or LinkedIn, and the leader of LinkedIn, the founder of LinkedIn, very, very aggressive Democrat donor. Interesting idea about going into red states, if you will, and suggesting in this legislation that your guest had to have grants, which means federal tax, right? Your tax dollars, federal money, training the next generation employee for Google or for Apple. You know, I think there should be training, but let Jeff Bezos pay for it. Let Apple pay for it. That's one of the differences here that we can look at.
Fair enough. Great point. That's why we love Tammy Bruce. Coming up, one of my favorite Swamp Watch investigations took on the shady Clinton Foundation. It's a can't miss encore after the break. Recently, the Clinton Foundation has made headlines for all the wrong reasons. So tonight, we want to revisit our Swamp Watch investigation into their shady dealings from earlier this year. Take a look. Tonight, we investigate the swamp that started it all. The Clinton Foundation is tonight's Swamp Watch. The Clinton Foundation has raised roughly $2 billion since its creation in 2001. Over $48 million of that's been from overseas governments. As Secretary of State under President Obama, Hillary Clinton was in a unique position to reward those countries for their generosity. Take Saudi Arabia, for example. They gave between $10 and $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. Seems like a wide range, right? Well, that's all we can tell you because that's all the Clinton Foundation will publicly disclose. As Secretary of State, Clinton had the power to approve or deny arms deals between American companies and foreign nations. So which foreign nation got her approval for a massive $29 billion weapons deal in 2011? Surprise, surprise, Saudi Arabia. Now, some Clinton defenders, and there are still some, not many, but they're out there, might say that's just a coincidence. After all, there's nothing that unusual about US firms selling weapons to the Saudis. Maybe not. But was this a coincidence too? Boeing, the defense contractor that manufactures the F-15 fighter jet that the Saudis were hoping to acquire in the deal, gave $900,000 to the Clinton Foundation just 2 months before the deal was finalized. Now, why would they do that, do you think? You've got to hand it to the Clintons, managing to get payoffs from both sides of that deal. It's truly world-class corruption that comes with years of practice. In fact, under Hillary Clinton, the State Department approved $165 billion worth of commercial arms sales to 20 nations whose governments gave money to the Clinton Foundation. That was nearly double the value of American arms sales made to those countries and approved by the State Department during the same period of George W. Bush's second term. But it must just be a coincidence. And here's another one. In 2009, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and a trade association funded by ExxonMobil lobbied Hillary Clinton's State Department for a new oil pipeline from Canada to Wisconsin. Just in case the lobbying wasn't enough, those 3 companies also donated between $2 and $3 million to the Clinton Foundation. Hillary approved the permit for the pipeline that same year. What a lot of coincidences the Clintons seem to be accumulating. This next one is Bill's. On his last day in office, President Clinton pardoned financier Mark Rich, who fled to Switzerland after being indicted on multiple federal charges, including tax evasion. How merciful. I guess it's just a coincidence that Mark Rich's wife, Denise, made a number of large donations to the Clinton Presidential Foundation, including $250,000 in 1998, $100,000 in 1999, and $100,000 in 2000, the year before her husband was pardoned. To paraphrase Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, the quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth, like giant checks into the Clintons' bank account. In 2010, Bill used his Clinton Global Initiative, an arm of the foundation that arranges corporate donations to various causes, to steer $2 million towards a company called Energy Pioneer Solutions, which was partially owned by his close friend, Julie Tauber McMahon. He also personally endorsed her company to the Secretary of Energy, earning it an $800,000 grant by the Department of Energy. In January 2014, the Fragrance Foundation, a trade group for the perfume industry, paid Bill Clinton $260,000 to give a speech that lasted less than an hour. Following the talk, the Clinton Foundation organized and partially funded a lime tree planting effort in Haiti that directly benefited Swiss company Firmenich International, one of the world's largest fragrance and flavoring suppliers. Clinton's $260,000 speaking fee wasn't even a donation to the foundation. It was reported as personal income. In fact, he was paid more than $100 million for speeches between 2001 and 2013. And since leaving the White House, he's made at least $26 million in speaking fees from companies and organizations that also donated to his foundation. Why do the Clintons get to double dip into these donors' pockets? It's simple, really. The more money these donors give to the Clintons, the more favor they find with one of the world's most powerful families. Here's another example. Following the horrific 2010 earthquake in Haiti, the government of Haiti set up a recovery committee chaired by Bill Clinton. Bill's committee asked Irish mobile telephone service provider Digicel to create a system to transfer relief money to Haiti via cell phones. In 6 months, Digicel brought in more than $50 million in revenue in Haiti. Here's the kicker. Digicel was run by Irish billionaire Dennis O'Brien, who set up a number of paid speeches for Bill Clinton and also donated millions of his own money to the Clinton Foundation. Another benefit of giving to the Clintons was special access to meetings with Hillary while she was Secretary of State. An AP investigation found that more than half the people outside the government who met with Hillary in the first half of her tenure gave money to the Clinton Foundation. Their total donation amount? Over $150 million. Even Chelsea Clinton warned of serious concerns over conflicts of interest at the foundation, especially in connection with a secretive lobbying firm, Teneo, set up by Hillary Clinton's former fundraiser and Bill Clinton's right-hand man. Many of Teneo's clients were also Clinton Foundation donors. Emails exposed by WikiLeaks showed Chelsea raising red flags because Teneo officials were using Bill Clinton's name to set up meetings for their lobbying clients like Dow Chemical and Coca-Cola, and hustling for clients at the Clinton Global Initiative. While all this was going on, Hillary's top aide, Huma Abedin, was a paid consultant to this lobbying firm, Teneo, while she was working at the State Department. And we haven't even mentioned the Uranium One deal, another Clinton coincidence, where Frank Giustra, who owned the uranium mining company Eurasia that later merged with Uranium One before it was sold to the Russians, donated over $30 million to the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton business model is the swamp in its most perfect form. Let's end with the words of legendary New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, who pretty much nailed it. Someday, the Clintons should give their tin cup to the Smithsonian. It's one of the wonders of the world. Coming up, it's still 2018, just about, but the Democrats' race to find a candidate to challenge President Trump in 2020 is on. Greg Gutfeld on that. And campaign workers is in full swing. The Democrats are itching to take on President Trump in 2020, and over 36 of them are reportedly exploring a bid. A little while ago, I talked to Greg Gutfeld about it. Take a look. President Trump is already talking 2020, and so are the Democrats. So who are the frontrunners, the dark horses, and who really stands a chance? Joining us now with an early look at the field is Greg Gutfeld. He is the co-host of The Five and the host of the Greg Gutfeld Show.
Yes.
It's got your name in it, so it must be true.
It is. I'm very excited about 2020.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
It's like, I saw a list of 90% of the people I've never heard of, but it's such an exciting time to watch the Democrats implode the way the Republicans did, right?
Because with so many people.
With so many people on one stage, what it does is it creates an opportunity for one person to stand out, which is what happened. It's that contrast theory. The reason why Trump did so well is because 17 people were from the same pond. Right?
Yes, exactly right.
And he was not. And if there were 4 or 5 Trumps, then there would have been a problem, but there's only one Trump. So I came up with a criteria. Would you like to hear it?
I've got one too. I want to hear yours first.
Okay, number one. You have to have somebody who can deal with Donald Trump.
Yes.
Right? So that's basically, you don't want a Prius. You want a 4x4 with traction control and mud tires. You want a car that can go off-road, so that the candidate needs to be able to go off-road to meet with Trump. This is something that hasn't happened before. Most candidates have to go against candidates that are similar to each other. Yes. In this case, that's not going to happen. You also have to have a sense of humor because you're going up against somebody who's funny. You got to be persuasive, which means that you can't talk in jargon. You got to talk like a 12th grader or an 8th grader. And you got to be surprising. The interesting thing about Trump is that he wasn't a by-the-book conservative by any means. So you can't be a cookie-cutter left-winger or right-winger. You have to surprise people by zigzagging. And you got to let go of the anger and be more about unity and less about divisiveness. I've come up with even a motto for the Democrats, but I'm not going to share it with them.
Because you don't want them to take your ideas.
Exactly. But think about 2020, the perfect vision.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
That's some kind of spectacles company.
Yes.
And look, the thing that I totally agree with you, because you didn't mention anything about whether they had to be moderate or progressive or this or that.
Doesn't matter.
I think that whole conversation is irrelevant.
Isn't it scary? It's scary because the thing is, I grew up with an ideology that had to be an important thing. Now it's about persuasiveness.
Yes.
And it's like, so...
So I tell you what I thought was, like, I was trying to think of, like, what's the real thing if I was trying to pick the right one for them. I think it's more than anything, it's someone who's exciting, who's interesting. So my sort of negative version of that was like the snooze index, who's the most boring.
Yes.
You just want to avoid the boring people. So speaking of which, we have some here.
Great.
And I'm going to test them out against your criteria. So who is that to start? Who is this person?
That guy, I think, sold me
This is like my impression of Judge Janine. Do you know street justice?
Exactly. And then she hits you if you're wrong. But he sold me homeowners insurance last year.
Interesting.
Yes, I don't know his name though. Or he's like a character actor in Law and Order. He always plays the architect in Law and Order. He's the one that they come.
Make sure the audience see this person.
Yeah, he's the one that the cops visit first, and he's like, he knew the victim. But then it turns out at the end, in the twist, he's the killer. Does he look? He looks like a Law and Order architect.
So this is John Hickenlooper.
Oh,
who is definitely in the dark horse.
He's a governor of Colorado.
Colorado, there you are. So a lot of people like him.
You know what I like about him? His name, Hickenlooper.
Well, I was going to ask you about
what it is.
Is it possible to have a President Hickenlooper?
I don't know. It
Is
sounds
that
like
gonna
a
be okay?
gadget from a science fiction movie. Get the Hickenlooper!
Okay,
Quick to the Hickenlooper!
What about this person?
Mark Cuban. I'm a fan of the Shark Tank. It's a good show. I like him in Shark Tank because he hates scams. Whenever everybody comes up with a product that is supposed to cure something, he gets really angry. He's somebody that you're not quite sure what his politics are.
So he sounds like he's pretty good on your checklist. I'm going to give him to you.
I'll give him a 1 to 10. I'm giving him a banana.
You didn't want Hickenlooper. What about this?
I think that I saw her on The View the other day. Not that I watched The View. It's just on at the gym.
Who is it?
Kristen Gillibrand.
Very good. Okay.
Not Christine Gillibrand, which is what Jesse Waters would say.
Right. Well,
because he always gets names wrong.
He's just ignorant.
Yeah, he is. He is. Finally.
I can say that because I don't have to sit around the table with him later on.
I love Jesse, but I think she's she could be very likable, but she's made some enemies. Remember, she was the first Democrat, one of the first to say goodbye to Al Franken. Right. And she was no friend of the Clintons, was she? I can't remember.
Speaking of which, I'm putting her over here. I don't think she passed your test. What about, hang on, I've got someone else. Yeah, there we are. Speaking of the Clintons.
Okay, this is a good point. 7 or 8 months ago, I said that she would run again, and everybody laughed at me. And I'll tell you why. I call it the obituary theory. Right. You don't want the first or second sentence of your obituary to say, she lost to Donald Trump, right? Because she was the Secretary of State, she was the First Lady, but she will be remembered for losing in probably one of the most historic elections of all time. How do you beat the obituary theory? You run again, and the story becomes the rematch.
Wow.
That's how you beat the obituary theory.
And how does she fit on your checklist?
I think that she has a problem with energy and likability. I think her party resents her for what happened to Bernie and how she lost to Donald Trump. Okay. But the story itself could be bigger.
In the middle. Not as bad as okay. All right, well, that's the ads. We're out of time, and it looks like it's President Cuban.
Yes, I think it's President Cuban.
Can we have a
No. Wait, I have two that you didn't mention. I think Kamala Harris is a definite. And also, one that's not in this is Mark Ruffalo. And I'll tell you why. Mark Ruffalo is he's a progressive activist actor who's relentlessly positive. So he's, I disagree with him on everything from the pipelines, you name it, climate change. We're not on the same page. But when I watch him, I can tell that he's actually genial, nice, fun, and smart. And he's also the Hulk.
Amazing.
Yes.
That is a good tip. So he's not the dark horse, the green horse.
Yes, he's the green horse. And I think the Democrats need somebody that can unite the party and the country, because you have this divisiveness going on. So it's about bringing America together. That should be their motto, bring America together. Bat. Then you can have a little bat. Bring America together. I should be in politics.
You should be running the campaign. Up next, Lisa, Teslin and Tammy are back with us to share their Christmas present suggestions for those possible Democrat 2020 candidates. You won't want to miss it. Presents for some of those Democrats that Greg and I discussed. Tammy, go on then.
Two ideas. One, because I'm a book reader, the book Shattered, inside the Clinton campaign that was doomed in 2016, to give them an idea of what the problems are. But then to follow that up, a gift certificate to any one of the number of online counseling services that exist, so that they'll have someone to talk to when it all goes south for them.
Fantastic. All right, Teslin.
My gift will be a gift of a word of advice. I'm looking forward to candidates stop pretending as if they're not running. Come on out the box so you can be a shiny new toy, so the American people can pull you back apart and put you back together again and see if you can withstand flames like a Lego.
All right, Santa Lisa.
So I'm introducing Elizabeth Warren into the equation. I would buy her a bottle of wine to numb the pain of her killing her presidential ambitions before they even started. That embarrassing DNA rollout turns out that she is less Native American than the average white person, yet she did this campaign video, made this huge deal about it, and now Democrat operators around her are raising the alarms and worried about her future.
Have it be Chardonnay. That'll be perfect.
Well, there you go. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was so lovely to see you all. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining
Steve.
us on this
Merry
special night.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Exactly.
everyone.
And see you all next Sunday. You won't want to miss our great special with world-renowned psychologist and author Dr. Jordan Peterson. Be sure to check out my deep dive show on Fox Nation and see you next Sunday when the next revolution will be televised.
Included if he were still alive. But I thought about this a great deal, and I wanted the world to see